it out. I said, man, this is the legend. This is the funniest man in the world.
They once made the whole world burst out laughing, once stood as the immortal faces of Hollywood. But behind the spotlight, a dark curse seems to cling to the cast of Friday 1995. Some were found lifeless inside a store. Some collapsed from a sudden heart attack right when their careers were shining bright. Some chose to end it all with a phone cord in a lonely hotel room. 10 faces that built a cinematic monument have now one by one departed in deaths soaked in tears and haunting memories. And now, the question that chills everyone to the bone. Who will be the next victim of the Friday curse? John Witherspoon, the comedic soul of Friday, and the sudden death that stunned Hollywood. In the world of American comedy and cinema, John Witherspoon was irreplaceable. He embodied a man both ordinary and sharp, an artist, with the gift to turn simple lines into classic moments. In Friday 1995, Witherspoon played Willie Jones, father of Craig Ice Cube. With just a handful of scenes, he left an indelible mark. Every time I come in the kitchen, you in the kitchen, eating up all the food in the house. Thanks to Willie Jones, Friday wasn't just raw street culture. It carried the warmth of a familiar family. Audiences saw the shadow of their own fathers in him. But then that brilliant life was cut short in tragedy. On the night of October 29, 2019, Hollywood was struck by devastating news. John Witherspoon collapsed at his home in Sherman Oaks, California. The cause was announced: a sudden heart attack. He passed away at 77, no warning, no last words. A comedy legend vanished in an instant, leaving behind a void nothing could ever fill. What made it even more shocking was that just before his death, Witherspoon was still performing, still discussing new projects. He showed no sign of weakness or fatigue. And then, in what seemed like an ordinary moment, the laughter of America's dad went silent forever. News of his passing spread like lightning. Fans were stunned, fellow artists frozen in disbelief. Ice Cube called it a terrible loss for Hollywood, while Marlon Wayans admitted it felt like losing a real father. John Witherspoon's funeral was held on November 5, 2019 in Los Angeles. His body was then laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park, Hollywood Hills, the famous resting place of countless film legends. It wasn't just a funeral, it was a Hollywood pilgrimage. Hundreds of artists, friends, and colleagues came to say goodbye. Arsenio Hall appeared visibly shaken. David Letterman, who had hosted Witherspoon on his talk show many times, bowed before the casket. The cast of Friday and the Wayans brothers stood in silence, unable to hold back their tears. The service overflowed with both sobs and bittersweet laughter as people recalled funny memories of him. Marlon Wayans wrote on Instagram, "I'm sad, I'm in pain, but I'm grateful to have called you Dad. On-screen and off-screen you were the same." Ice Cube, his son in cinema, left just one brief but piercing line: "A legend has passed. I will always remember the times we worked together." At 77, when his heart stopped, John Witherspoon left behind an estate estimated at around $4 million. He owned at least 2 houses in Sherman Oaks, California, bought in the early 2000s, one valued at $830,000, the other over $550,000. They weren't just properties, but homes filled with laughter, family gatherings, and ultimately his final breath. His wife, Angela Robinson, his partner for more than 30 years of marriage, became the guardian of that legacy. Their 2 sons, John David J.D. and Alexander, inherited not only his assets, but also his artistic spirit. J.D. in particular stepped into acting, carrying on his father's comedic spark, as if the laughter never truly ended. But perhaps the greatest legacy Witherspoon left behind cannot be measured in dollars. For decades, he carved out the image of the quintessential black father in popular culture. Stern, witty, and warm all at once, John Witherspoon is gone, leaving behind a deep emptiness in the hearts of fans. But tragically, he was not the only Friday star to fall in such sorrow. Just over a decade earlier, Hollywood had already been shaken by the death of another comedic giant, a man who brought explosive laughter to millions, yet left this world powerless. Bernie Mac, from comedy legend to a sudden death at 50. Bernard Jeffrey McCullough, known to the world by his stage name, Bernie Mac, was born in 1957 in Chicago. Coming from poverty, he began his career on small comedy stages where he impressed audiences with his street comedy style, raw, blunt, yet irresistibly charming. In Friday 1995, Bernie Mac appeared as Pastor Clever, a hypocritical, over-the-top preacher, always preaching morality, while secretly sneaking around in an affair. Though it was only a minor role, he turned the character into an unforgettable highlight, making audiences laugh uncontrollably. After Friday, Bernie Mac's career skyrocketed. He became one of the kings of comedy alongside Steve Harvey Cedric, the entertainer, and D.L. Hewley, the legendary comedy group that toured across America, selling out every arena they stepped into. But behind the spotlight of laughter, Bernie Mac silently battled a cruel disease for years, sarcoidosis, a rare inflammatory illness that causes immune cells to clump into growths, mostly in the lungs and immune system. The disease made it harder and harder for him to breathe, yet onstage audiences never knew. He still performed, still laughed, still erupted with energy, as if nothing could ever bring him down. By the summer of 2008, his health collapsed rapidly. On August 1, 2008, Bernie Mac was rushed to Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago with severe pneumonia, a direct complication from sarcoidosis that had plagued him for years. He was immediately admitted to the intensive care unit ICU. At first, doctors still held on to hope. His family prayed constantly and fans everywhere sent their wishes. But his condition worsened quickly. He struggled to breathe, his organs began to fail. Doctors placed him on a ventilator, pumped him with medicine, but every effort grew more and more powerless. In the early morning of August 9, 2008, Bernie Mac's heart stopped. He was gone at 50 years old, right at the peak of his career, with audiences still waiting for dozens more performances. That death hit Hollywood like a thunderclap. A man who once declared with full confidence, "I ain't scared of you. The harder the crowd reacts, the stronger I become." Yet he was struck down by an invisible illness that had silently eaten away at his body for years. American media reported non-stop. CNN aired a special bulletin. Millions of fans were stunned, unable to believe that one of the kings of comedy, who had just made them roar with laughter on TV, was now gone forever. On August 16, 2008, just 1 week after Bernie Mac drew his last breath, a grand funeral was held at House of Hope Church in Chicago, a massive church with more than 10,000 seats. Over 6,000 people attended, not only family and friends, but also ordinary fans, people who had grown up with Bernie Mac's laughter. They filled the church, while many stood outside in long lines, holding his photos or movie posters, eyes red from crying. Hollywood stars gathered in force: Chris Rock, Samuel L. Jackson, Don Cheadle Cedric, the entertainer Steve Harvey, D.L. Hewley, the very men who had shared the stage with him as kings of comedy. Steve Harvey couldn't hold back tears as he stood before the casket, his voice trembling. "Bernie wasn't just a friend, he was a piece of my heart. He left too soon, too unfairly." His wife, Rhonda McCullough, sat in the front row, clutching her husband's portrait. Beside her was their only daughter, Janice McCullough, her eyes drenched in tears. That day, Chicago seemed to stop breathing. A city mourned its gifted son, and the world bowed its head to a death far too sudden. Bernie Mac left behind an estate estimated at about $15 million. Most of it went to his wife, Rhonda McCullough, his partner since 1977, and their only daughter, Janice. But material wealth was only a small part. The greatest legacy Bernie Mac left was cultural. He helped change how the world viewed black comedy, turning it into a social weapon, one that entertained while reflecting real life. The Bernie Mac Show remains a classic sitcom, while the Kings of Comedy Tour will forever be an unrepeatable milestone. Bernie Mac's laughter lives not just on screen but in the memories of millions worldwide. But the Friday curse did not stop there. Just a few years later, another icon, the infamous bully, would also leave this world in a tragedy just as haunting: Tommy Lister Jr. Debo, the infamous bully, and a haunting death. In Friday 1995, no one could ever forget Debo, the notorious bully with bulging muscles. A menacing glare, always prowling the neighborhood to steal bikes, snatch chains, or intimidate anyone who got in his way. The role was brought to life by Tommy "Tiny" Lister Jr., a former professional wrestler with a gigantic frame, standing nearly 6'5" and weighing over 290 pounds. Born in 1958, Lister first pursued athletics and wrestling before breaking into Hollywood. Beyond Friday and its sequel Next Friday 2000, he appeared in major films like The Fifth Element 1997, The Dark Knight 2008, and even participated in WWE events. Behind the intimidating glare, massive muscles, and villainous roles that spread fear on screen in real life, Tommy "Tiny" Lister Jr. was humorous, kind, and compassionate. Friends said he was always the icebreaker on set, with his booming laugh a complete contrast to the menacing Debo audiences knew. But tragically, fate handed him a haunting ending. In December 2020, at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic in the US, Tommy Lister Jr. canceled multiple shoots and press events as his health declined. He appeared in media looking fatigued, complaining of shortness of breath, loss of taste, and loss of smell, classic symptoms of COVID. On December 10, 2020, his manager and friends couldn't reach him. When police and paramedics forced open the door of his Marina del Rey, California apartment, they found Lister unconscious. Attempts to revive him failed. He died alone at just 62 years old. At first, the public was shaken, believing he had died from COVID-19, but the coroner's report later revealed the primary cause was atherosclerotic heart disease and high blood pressure, with COVID only contributing to the rapid decline. A giant who once spread fear on screen had fallen quietly in his own apartment, a tragedy that left Hollywood stunned. By late December 2020, Tommy Lister Jr.'s funeral was held in California. But unlike other stars whose farewells drew thousands, his service took place under strict pandemic restrictions. Attendance was limited. Many seats remained empty, and everyone present wore masks and kept their distance. Even so, the atmosphere was full of love. Industry friends came to bow their heads in respect, while those who couldn't attend sent white wreaths. Ice Cube, his Friday co-star, wrote on Twitter, "R.I.P. Tiny Debo Lister," a brother who brought us one of the most memorable characters in cinema history. It was not just a farewell, it was recognition. Though Lister's career wasn't as vast as other stars, Debo became immortal. Anthony Johnson, Eckles and the Shocking Death in a Store. In Friday 1995, Anthony A.J. Johnson played Eckles, the limping broke neighbor, always faking injuries to beg for pocket change. With his hobbling walk and nonstop chatter, Eckles' brief appearances still made audiences laugh so hard they memorized his lines. "I just fell. Somebody give me a little money for my medicine." Though just a minor role, Johnson turned Eckles into the comic soul of South Central's neighborhood, the kind of character no Friday fan could ever forget. Anthony Johnson became one of the most familiar faces of 90s street comedy films, but tragedy struck. On September 6, 2021 in Los Angeles, Anthony Johnson collapsed inside a discount store. Shoppers panicked, employees called 911. Paramedics rushed in, performed CPR, injected heart stimulants, but he never woke up. 2 weeks later, on September 20, 2021, the hospital confirmed Anthony Johnson had taken his final breath, gone at 55 years old. No warning, no goodbye. Only the haunting image Eckles, the man who once faked falling to beg for money, now truly fallen, and this time he would never get up again. His family confirmed the cause was linked to chronic heart disease. But for fans, the shock was far heavier than any medical term. A death so ordinary in such an ordinary place, yet it planted a lasting ache in their hearts. As devastating as the death was, the pain didn't stop there. His family revealed they couldn't afford a funeral. His wife, Lexis Jones Mason, broke down in tears in a video plea on GoFundMe. "My husband did not have life insurance. We weren't prepared for this at all. I don't want to beg for money, but I have no other choice. He deserves a proper service." Her words shook America. A man who once brought laughter to the world was now gone in poverty, leaving his family begging for help just to bury him. Immediately, friends and colleagues stepped up. Names like Lil Rel Howery, Offset, Michael Blackson donated. Fans across the country sent in what they could. Thanks to that support, in early October 2021, Johnson's funeral was finally held in California. No glamour, no extravagance, only tears and tight embraces. Yet for fans, it was the farewell he truly deserved for an artist who had made them laugh for decades. Anthony Johnson left no fortune behind. What he left was a bitter truth. Hollywood can make you a star overnight, but just as quickly it can abandon you in poverty when the spotlight fades. On social media, millions of fans reshared Eckles' scenes of falling and faking injury. This time, they laughed and cried at once because they knew Anthony Johnson's final fall was one he would never rise from. Just a few years earlier, another actress who had brought her own charm and laughter to the film had already fought a brutal battle with cancer, only to leave this world in agony. Ivet Wilson, Rita, the actress who fell after a battle with cancer. In Friday, 1995, Ivet Wilson played Rita, the sharp-tongued neighbor, always arguing, nagging, and nitpicking Smokey Chris Tucker. Though her screen time was limited, Rita left an unforgettable impression because Ivet gave the character a natural charm, both sassy and funny, making audiences burst into laughter. But Rita was only a small part of her career. Ivet Wilson truly shined on American television in the 1990s with her role as Andell Wilkerson in the hit sitcom Moshe and its popular spin-off The Parkers. To black audiences, she was more than an actress. She was a big sister of television, smart, funny, and relatable. Behind the spotlight, Ivet Wilson faced a horrifying battle. She was diagnosed with both cervical cancer and kidney cancer at the same time. The cruel illness consumed her health day by day. In her final years, Wilson went through countless chemotherapy and radiation treatments. Her body withered, her hair fell out, her strength drained away. Friends revealed she fought in silence, never complaining, never seeking pity, though the pain could not be hidden. By 2012, her illness had advanced too far. She could fight no longer. On June 14, 2012, Ivet Wilson took her final breath at the age of 48. The news of her death shocked the American entertainment world. Rita, the sassy neighbor from Friday who once made audiences laugh endlessly, had been struck down by merciless cancer. Her funeral was held in California, attended by many friends, colleagues, and fans. Cast members of Moshe and The Parkers, including Brandy Norwood, Countess Vaughn, and Shar Jackson, came to say goodbye. Colleagues remembered Ivet as someone who kept smiling through pain, who encouraged others, even when she herself was in despair. They said she was a light. No matter how much the illness tortured her, she still smiled. On social media, countless stars posted tributes. Fans everywhere shared clips of Rita and Andell keeping alive the laughter she once gave them. Ivet Wilson did not leave behind a massive fortune. In fact, her family faced enormous medical bills after years of treatment. But she left something more valuable, the image of a resilient woman who dared to smile even in the face of death. After Ivet Wilson's passing, the Friday curse gained another haunting chapter. And the tragedies were still not over. For more faces, more laughter would one by one fade away in grief. Lwanda Paige, the Queen of Comedy and a Fateful End. She was called the Queen of Comedy, known as Aunt Esther, with her ever-present handbag, razor-sharp glare, and cutting tongue that could tear anyone apart on stage. Lwanda Paige, born in 1920, made America roar with laughter throughout the 1970s in Sanford and Son before leaving her mark as Mrs. Jones in Friday 1995. In Friday, she didn't need many lines. Just a stern look, a frown, and the audience burst into laughter. That was Lwanda's style. She didn't act, she lived on screen. The Iron Woman she portrayed reflected millions of black mothers in real life, tough, strict, yet always protecting their families with deep love. But even an Iron Woman eventually fell. In her later years, Lwanda suffered recurring heart attacks and strokes. Her body weakened, her breathing labored, yet she kept her trademark sarcasm, still cracking jokes to mask the pain. On September 14, 2002, tragedy struck. Her heart stopped after a massive heart attack compounded by a stroke. A legend ended at the age of 81. Her funeral in Los Angeles turned into a massive tribute. Friends, colleagues, students, and those who saw her as a role model came together to share memories. People wept and laughed through tears because no one could recall Lwanda without recalling her sharp humor beneath the sternness. Lwanda Paige did not leave behind mansions or vast wealth. She left something greater, a fearless comedic style, bold, raw, unafraid to laugh at social prejudices. Thanks to her, black female comedians could step on stage with confidence, not as sidekicks but as leaders of laughter. The image of Aunt Esther from Sanford and Son and Mrs. Jones from Friday will forever live in audiences' memories. And when people speak of Lwanda Paige, they don't just remember an actress, but a woman who turned a sharp tongue into a cultural weapon that made the whole world laugh. Ronaldo Ray, the veteran comedian, supporting roles, and a quiet death. He was never an A-list star, but Ronaldo Ray was a face every audience recognized. Born in Oklahoma, Ray started on small comedy stages before finding his way into film and television. In Friday 1995, he played a minor character in South Central, an older man mumbling to himself, drawing laughs from everyday quirks. That was Ray's gift, turning the ordinary into extraordinary comedy. Throughout his career, he appeared in more than 50 films and dozens of television shows. He was the kind of artist people called a pillar of comedy, not flashy, but enduring, consistent, and always memorable. But that long stage life ended in a quiet tragedy. In 2014, Ray suffered a severe stroke that devastated his health. Despite care from his family and doctors, his body never returned to what it once was. On May 28, 2015, at a hospital in Los Angeles, Ronaldo Ray took his last breath at the age of 75. The cause was complications from the lingering stroke. A laugh that lasted more than 40 years went silent in a lonely hospital room. His funeral was simple without the fanfare or thousands of mourners that A-list stars received. Yet for his colleagues and black audiences, it was a true loss. Ray was more than just a supporting actor, he was part of a collective memory, a familiar face on the screen. Younger comedians called him a trailblazer, an elder who inspired them to step on stage and make a living through comedy. Ronaldo Ray left behind no mansions or vast fortunes. What he left was hundreds of supporting roles characters that seemed small, but together helped shape the world of American comedy in the 1980s and 1990s. And in Friday, he left one final mark, a humble role that still made audiences laugh. That was how Ronaldo Ray left the stage, not with noise, but in a way people would never forget. Another familiar face, though she never had much screen time, still managed to leave her mark on audiences before passing away. A quiet death, just shy of her 64th birthday. Jennifer Eckles, the church lady, and a quiet death at 63. She was never a breakout star, but anyone who watched Friday After Next 2002 surely remembers Jennifer Eckles as one of the church ladies, a simple supporting role that added a special touch to the story. Before Friday After Next, Eckles also appeared in major films like The Notebook 2004 and The Lady Killers 2004. Though her parts were small, she always left an impression with her natural down-to-earth presence, the embodiment of an everyday black woman. Jennifer Eckles' artistic life never carried much glamour, and her death came as quietly as her career. In 2018, just days before her 64th birthday, Eckles passed away. The cause of death was never widely disclosed, only that she had been battling illness for some time. When the news broke, there were no breaking reports on CNN, no massive Hollywood memorials. Only friends and former colleagues spoke of her mourning a woman who had quietly dedicated herself to her craft. Jennifer Eckles had no Oscars, no vast fortune to her name. But she left something else, the memory of honest, heartfelt supporting characters. She left this world without noise, without flashing lights. But like many other Friday supporting actors, Jennifer Eckles became proof of a bitter truth. In Hollywood, the spotlight doesn't always save you from a quiet, forgotten death. The Friday curse continued to spread its shadow, and this time it set its sights on a promising young talent, Justin Pierce, the rebellious actor and skateboarder who chose to leave the world at just 25. Justin Pierce Roach, The Unfinished Smile, and The Fatal Chord. He appeared in Next Friday 2000 as Roach, the goofy white kid who was close with Day Day, and Craig, always getting swept up in their wild antics. Roach brought fresh energy, naive, silly, but sincere. It was only a small role, yet enough to make audiences laugh and to show the real Justin Pierce, rebellious, gritty, and unlike anyone else. Off-screen, Pierce was also a professional skateboarder, famous in New York's skateboarding scene in the 1990s. He caused a sensation in Kids 1995, a notorious film that became a cultural phenomenon, turning Pierce into a symbol of street youth rebellion in America. Behind the spotlight, Justin Pierce was not the carefree guy Roach seemed to be. He was a soul full of cracks, sinking into drugs, alcohol, and chaotic relationships. Friends said there were days when he laughed loudly on set, bantering as if nothing could knock him down. But when the camera stopped, Justin withdrew into the dark, his eyes vacant, his lips trembling as if a gloomy storm was gnawing at his spirit. On July 10, 2000 in Las Vegas, with neon lights blazing outside, a very different scene unfolded inside a room at the Bellagio Hotel. The door was locked, the room's silent, dim yellow light cast on cold walls. There, Justin Pierce hanged himself with a phone cord. When hotel staff found him, it was too late. On the table, there was a suicide note, the final lines that to this day have never been made public. He left at only 25, too young, too fierce, too haunting. That death cut across Hollywood like a blade. Roach, the goofy, awkward guy audiences loved, had ended his life in cruel solitude. Justin Pierce's death left Hollywood stunned, but the shock was even heavier in the skateboarding community. To them, Pierce was not just an actor, he was a rebellious icon, the New York street kid who once carried his board through Washington Square Park, before rising to the Hollywood screen. His funeral took place in Los Angeles in mid-July 2000. Not lavish, not showy, but the air was thick with grief. Friends and colleagues in the skate world wore hoodies, brought old skateboards, and arranged them around the casket like a private farewell ritual. The sound of wheels rolling on the floor echoed the familiar sound of Justin, now turned into sobs. Colleagues in film like Chloe Sevigny, his co-star in Kids, and the cast of Next Friday were in shock. They could not believe the guy who had just played a silly Joker on screen had chosen such a brutal death. In the press, he was called a star who fell too fast. On the social networks of that time, forums and fanzines, fans left thousands of messages of grief. You lived fast, you died young. But you will always be a legend. In the memory of those who knew him, Justin Pierce was a living paradox, a young man who made others laugh, but could not save himself from the darkness within. The year he died on a wall in Washington Square, where he had skated in his youth, someone wrote "Roach Forever." Those words were not only for the character, but for Justin Pierce himself. Because even though he left at 25, the image of the goofy boy with a skateboard in his hand remains etched in fans' memories. Justin Pierce Roach closed his life at 25 with a chilling, haunting death. And the Friday Curse gained another tragic chapter. But fate did not stop, for right after that, the shadow of death called the name of a Hollywood giant, Lwanda Paige, the legendary Aunt Esther, mother of Debbie in Friday. Before appearing in Friday 1995 as the mother of Debbie, played by Nia Long, a strict and dignified woman with quiet charm, Lwanda Paige was already a living legend. American audiences called her Aunt Esther, the classic character in the sitcom Sanford and Son from 1972 to 1977. With eyes sharp as knives, a steely voice, and cutting put-downs, Aunt Esther became one of the most iconic female roles in American television. That edgy, satirical style earned Lwanda the title Queen of Satire in black comedy. But even an Iron Woman cannot escape the cruelty of time. After decades on stage and screen, Lwanda Paige's health declined severely. She battled many heart attacks, then a devastating stroke. On September 14, 2002, she took her last breath in Los Angeles at the age of 81. News of her passing shocked audiences. A woman who had once made America roar with laughter, now left quietly, leaving a void nothing could fill. Her funeral was solemn, yet full of affection. Friends, colleagues, and many young comedians came to pay their respects. They shared memories of her, recalled Aunt Esther's classic tongue lashings, and then laughed through their tears. The legacy. A woman who dared to be sharp, tongue to make America laugh. Lwanda Paige did not leave behind vast wealth, but she left a greater legacy, a path for black female artists to enter comedy. At a time when black women were pushed to the margins, she dared to stand tall, dared to be sharp-tongued on national television, and turned herself into a legend. With Friday, she was Mrs. Jones, the strict mother. With Sanford and Son, she was Aunt Esther, an immortal icon. And in the hearts of audiences, Lwanda Paige will always be the woman who proved that laughter can be as sharp as a knife and as warm as a mother's embrace. 10 faces, 10 fates. Some died of illness. Some fell in the pandemic. Some were so poor they could not afford a funeral. Some chose horrifying deaths in hotel rooms. All of them helped create one of Hollywood's classic comedies, only to leave one by one in tragedies that still haunt us. And the question that still makes people shudder after nearly 3 decades remains. Does the Friday Curse truly exist, and who will be next?
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast.
There is still so much more to explore. Stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on your screen.